This is the new film from Michel Franco, a Mexican director, whose previous film was After Lucia. It was this incredibly austere and brutal drama about cyberbullying. I think it premiered at Cannes and then it came out in here straight to DVD. Chronic is Michel Franco's first film to be released in UK cinemas. It premiered at Cannes as well last year, where I managed to miss it. And it provoked this outcry over this incredibly long tracking shot with which the film ends. And any kind of outcry at Cannes is always slightly interesting because, why are people getting so worked up about this movie? And so I was intrigued to see it. And having now seen it, I can see why this shot wound people up as much as it did. The film stars Tim Roth as this palliative care nurse called David, who works in people's homes. Not only does he administer medication, but he also helps people out with daily tasks like getting washed, getting dressed, cooking lunch and things like that. He has a very personable but professional manner. And he's the kind of person that you'd be very happy to have in your home. But the first time that we see him sitting in a car outside someone's house and observing their comings and goings. They're getting into the car, they're getting out of the car, doing bits and pieces. Not in the way that a carer would, but in the way that a stalker would. And then he follows their car at a slight distance. So we know that there's something slightly remiss about him and that his motives are immediately brought into question. That is then borne out further shortly into the film where he's at the funeral of one of his former patients and the patient's niece comes to talk to him to get a little bit of closure about, what was my aunt like? And this is how that conversation pans out.
You want to ride?
No, I'm just at the gate there. I'm not far.
I'm Karen, Sarah's niece.
I know.
Come on, get in.
No, I'm just here.
Come on. I was surprised to see you.
Really? Why?
Do you always go to your patients' funerals?
Sometimes, yes.
They told me you got along. She really liked you. So what do you do now? Do you have another patient?
Not yet, no. This is me, just you.
Look, do you want to get some breakfast or something? Just talk a little bit more.
I should go.
I just want to ask you a couple of questions about my aunt.
I'm sorry.
Roth is getting some great reviews for this film.
I think he's very good. I don't like what he's being asked to do in this film, but I think he pulls it off incredibly well. But you can see from that conversation, this rapport and the intimacy that he has with his patients, he could use for good to offer the family some kind of comfort afterwards, where they weren't necessarily around doing the hard work that he was, but he deliberately withholds it. In fact, he's this kind of slightly weird and vampiric character where he feeds off this sense of people approaching death, and he enjoys the fact that the people he's caring for in a very weird way are going to die, and he enjoys the fact that this allows him to sort of fast track a relationship with them in the way that he can just drop into the family home, and this decades long relationship a parent might have with their child is suddenly replaced by him being the number one favourite person in the household, and he cancels other nurses coming round so he can sit with them and watch movies, and has this sort of inappropriate boundary crossing relationship with them where it's very much a personal friendship rather than a professional relationship, but that the patients also welcome, and he also starts parlaying details of his patient's life into his own life. So he's this very, very odd character, and Tim Roth does it very well, and I sort of admire the control and restraint with which this film is made and the oddness of the character, but not really what it's saying about life, which is that, ultimately the approach to death is very drawn out and very miserable and very grueling, and it doesn't really offer any lasting sense of satisfaction to anyone, and the end of life is just a horrible thing. And I think pointing it out in a slightly kind of nihilistic way doesn't really get us anywhere. And what Chronic made me wonder is this just something, do I like films about death to be more sentimental or softer? Are there any films like this that I've enjoyed? And, one of them recently was Michael Haneke's Amour, and I think Haneke's austere style and locked-off camera work is something that Michel Franco tries to replicate in this, but he has none of Haneke's compositional rigour or this kind of deep sort of philosophical thinking that you find in a Haneke film and that you certainly found in Amour. Also something like Bergman's Cries and Whispers, Sarah Polley's Away From Her, Steve McQueen's Hunger, I think, above all. If you're going to aestheticize the approach to death, let's go to town on it, and let's have Michael Fassbender wasting away in that movie, which I just think was incredibly beautiful and moving in a way that Chronic isn't. It's got this kind of sculptural sensibility, and I think that's possibly what Michel Franco's reaching for in this, and it doesn't quite ever get.
So that thing that you were saying before about the outrage it can about those long tracking shots, he's not using that as a device to get you inside the characters' heads.
He's using it as a way to make you puzzle over what the character's thinking, and there's a lot of shots of Roth jogging on a treadmill at the gym, and he's sort of working through what he's done in the day in his head, and you're trying to read his face and work out what's going on. And Roth pulls that off magnificently well. That's very, very well done. And then later in the film, it tries to do that again, and it just gets very irritating.